This is The Fence, an excellent example of modern art which contains 30 concrete figures in a spiral. Part of a collection owned by the Museum of Outdoor Arts, The Fence was the result of combining the concepts of classical art with 20th century technology. Although the sculptures may remind you of ancient statues, these concrete and steel pieces were just recently completed by artists Carolyn Broxma and Andy Dufford. Having two artists work together on the same piece of artwork requires a special sense of cooperation and teamwork. Carolyn and Andy both used their unique talents in producing The Fence. And although each one had very strong ideas of what the artwork should look like, through communication and a willingness to compromise, they were able to create a finished piece which expressed both of their ideas. The actual process used in making the fence is similar to the commercial process used in making walls and sidewalks out of concrete. Simply stated, a container or mold is first made, then the wet concrete is poured in and allowed to dry. When the mold is removed, the hardened concrete still keeps the shape of the mold. The fence requires molds which were fairly complex and took a great deal of time and skill to make, but the general process is the same. Concrete is poured in, allowed to harden, and the molds are removed. For every one of the 30 sculptures in the fence, a different mold was made. To make the leg sections of each piece, molds are formed out of sheet metal. The metal is cut, rolled, and welded to produce hollow tubes which, when filled, will serve as legs. Making the legs of each piece a different length, Carolyn and Andy made molds of assorted heights from 3 to 9 feet high. To make the upper body or torso of each piece, plaster molds were cast using live models as the original forms. Each model is first coated with Vaseline in order to keep the plaster from sticking to his skin. The plaster is then mixed and applied to the chest of each model. It is important for the subject to remain as still as possible in order to prevent the hardening plaster from cracking. On drying, the plaster cast is removed. The cast is a reversed copy of the model's torso, identical in detail even down to the pores of the skin. This cast is later attached to the metal legs. Long before any concrete is poured, the placement of the pieces is carefully decided. Andy and Carolyn chose to create an involute spiral with the statues so that viewers could participate by walking in and among the pieces. The use of the involute spiral was exciting to the artists because of the way it occurs in nature. Ram's horns and a variety of seashells are both examples of involute spirals. The use of the spiral shape for the fence helps remind the viewer that art is often simply a new way of seeing the world around us. In placing the figures, Carolyn and Andy varied the height and orientation of each one in order to help it stand out from among the rest. Once the placement of each piece was decided, it was time to get ready for pouring the concrete. In order to give the fence stability, a secure footing was prepared. A ditch was dug in the shape of the spiral, and a framework made from a form of metal called rebar was placed in the trench. The rebar frame was then covered with concrete, except for the pieces where the molds would be attached. Each mold is welded to the rebar and then taped to prevent leaking. Because the molds are so heavy when filled with concrete, additional support is given by boards and wires. The molds are then ready to be filled. Pouring the concrete is a difficult job requiring hard work and lots of time. The concrete is delivered to the site by truck, where it is then poured into a pumping machine. The concrete slurry is pumped through a large hose and flows out into the molds. Once filled, the tops of the figures are smoothed over. The molds and their supporting systems are then left to dry and harden for a month. This allows the concrete a chance to achieve maximum strength. Removing the molds is also a difficult and time-consuming task, but the satisfaction of seeing the completed piece is well worth the time and effort. After rough spots are smoothed and the site is cleaned up, the fence is complete. The many months of creativity, careful design, and hard work are finally rewarded.